The very first moment out of my body, I knew that we go on. I didn't need the full near death experience. I just knew. I was like, wow, I'm seeing the surgeons, I'm seeing my body and me. I go on. And I felt more intelligent, sharper, crisper. Like it was almost like this brain is a limiter of consciousness. And as soon as I was outside of my body, I just felt great. And it was almost amusing. Like it wasn't horrifying in any way. I was just like, oh, there's that body. Like I just discarded a dress or a shirt or something. There wasn't a huge attachment to the body because my soul, my spirit form felt like the real me. Hi, I'm Tricia Barker. I was in college when I decided that in order to get my life together, I was going to run a 10K. And I hadn't run a 10K before, but I loved running in high school. And that was something that brought me out of depression. And I'd had a few major episodes of depression, and I was agnostic. I really didn't believe in the other side. I had a lot of very logical, scholarly friends, and that was my group. We preferred logic and study and education. I had grown up religious, but I had had a lot of spiritual abuse, religious abuse, narcissistic abuse. And so I just thought, I'm not really seeing any love in these churches. I'm seeing a lot of judgment. And so to me, I was just like, go in the direction of success and education and moving forward. But I was unhappy. Like there was a deep existential loneliness that I had deep within me. And I think when you don't believe in anything, that existential loneliness can hit you at times. And I was afraid of death. And there were moments I would be driving and I had those thoughts pretty frequently leading up to the near death experience. And I almost feel like the universe was conspiring in a way to bring me to this point. I had taken a religious studies class, and there was this line in William James' book about the variety of religious experiences. And one person said, the thing is, when you have a spiritual experience, you're never the same again. So you really can't describe why someone changes. They just do. And they're open to a different form of consciousness. And I remember getting chills when I read that. And I thought, will that be me? Will I have that at some point in my life? And I was like, oh, whatever, and then moved on. So on the day of the race, I woke up early and I had all these dreams that were terrifying. I heard my father screaming down this tunnel, watch out, Tricia. And I heard my mom going, oh no, I can't believe this is happening. How could this happen? And she was like freaking out in my dream. And I woke up several times and I was like, oh, that was terrifying. Okay, just get to the race. I normally drink coffee. I didn't get coffee. I wasn't a morning person. So already everything was just off. And I had a major accident on the way to the race. The lights were not synchronized. And I went through the first one, it was yellow. The second one was red. And I just remember seeing this car coming almost head on at me. And we were both going so fast. Like I remember putting my foot on the brake, but there just wasn't time. I think I barely touched the brake and we collided, and my body just felt so hot that I mean, I was sweating. That's the way the trauma felt. And I couldn't move. So I was slumped over to one side and I couldn't reach my driver's license or registration. Eventually a nurse stopped for us and she stayed with me and said, hey, don't move, you've had some neck or back injuries, they're going to put you on a board and you're going to go into the hospital. I was like, well, not running the race today. That's obviously not happening. But I said this one prayer, but it wasn't that earnest. It was just like a foxhole prayer of, oh God, if there is a God, please help me. This is horrible. I felt like I could die or never walk again. And I waited for many, many hours before they were able to do spinal surgery. Austin is a college town, and so a lot of people have car accidents. And so there was a long wait for a surgeon who would take someone without health insurance. And I knew this because I overheard some nurses saying one guy wasn't coming in because I didn't have health insurance. And I lost it at that point. I remember that moment because my consciousness changed so much before and after. I was mad about not having a surgeon operate on me right away. I was worried about not walking. I was who's going to take care of my classes and withdraw me from all my classes at the university. Everything was about my body, my life, how much it was going to cost. And then I went under because this one doctor, she decided to take my case, even though she had been working for a long time. And as soon as that mask was placed over me, I just went into blackness and darkness. And I don't know how long I was under before I had the near death experience, but I know they had time to open up my back. I was face forward, and I have a long incision all the way down my spine and hip because they took bone from the hip to replace part of the shattered vertebrae. And then they put rods above and below and rods along the spine. There was so much blood. I lifted up out of my body, and the very first moment out of my body, I knew that we go on. I didn't need the full near-death experience. I just knew. I was like, wow, I'm seeing the surgeons, I'm seeing my body, and me, I go on. And I felt more intelligent, sharper, crisper. Like it was almost like this brain is a limiter of consciousness. And as soon as I was outside of my body, I just felt great. And it was almost amusing. Like it wasn't horrifying in any way. I was just like, oh, there's that body. Like I just discarded a dress or a shirt or something. There wasn't a huge attachment to the body because my soul, my spirit form felt like the real me. And then when I saw the angels behind the doctors, that's when I really changed because I knew there's so much more than this 3D realm. There are literally higher beings that are our guides and are there for us, and they're great healers. They're magnificent. The angels were beautiful. They had hair a little shorter than mine. It was wavy and not really male or female. They just were like beautiful men, really beautiful men or strong women. They didn't have a gender necessarily. And I remember thinking that was odd. Their eyes were lights. So their eyes were this healing, emanating light that communicated as well. So as they looked at me, they were communicating many things to my soul and calming me down and telling me everything was going to be fine and that I was going to walk and run. Then almost playfully, they said, watch this. And I was very enamored with my surgeon. I thought she was a young woman, like 35, and she was the top surgeon at this hospital. And I was like, yeah, successful woman. That meant something to me at the time. And I remember thinking, I wonder if she knows that angels are assisting her because they were sending light through her hands into my body. And my body just lit up with this healing light. And I knew that the light was both healing and intelligence. They were both assisting her and healing me in this moment. And I just remember thinking, wow, do other people have angels working through them? And are they always around them? Can we use them? This is going to change my reality forever. And then the monitor stopped. It made that long beep sound. And I was like, ooh, so the body's technically dead now. I don't want to watch them revive me. That was my first thought. So I was like, let's get out of here. And I left and I went into the corridor and I saw, like, down a hall, I saw my stepdad getting a candy bar out of the machine. And they were health nuts and they always yelled at people for drinking sodas or eating things like that. And I chuckled because I was like, oh, he's eating a candy bar. I know they have to wait up late to find out if I make it or not. But I remember thinking, hey, now that I'm out of body, do I really have to go back to body? And if I don't, he's going to take care of mom and it'll be fine. This is an adventure. It felt like international travel. That's the only thing I can compare it to. It was something so new, this brand new way of being. And then I left the hospital and I was flying in the night sky and it was just freeing. And I remember sending love to everyone I'd ever met, even for a brief moment, and just going, hey, we're all connected. None of this matters. Any of the things we worry about, it really doesn't matter. love is all that matters. And that was my first realization that, oh, when you fly free, judgment or anger or bitterness or unforgiveness, that's a heaviness. That's like a darker energy. It doesn't vibrate high enough to take it with you. And so in that state of freedom, I was like, love and freedom, that's all you take with you. And so I thought about happy moments, and then I flew through. It was really like a quick transition, but it was like the night sky. Some people talk about a tunnel, but then I was probably light years away into this cosmos. And it looks, where I was, looks a lot like the Carina Nebula. So the James Webb Telescope is bringing back images. And when I saw those first images and it was clearer and more crisp, I was like, I was in the middle of that. I was just floating in the Carina Nebula, just at peace. And how could anyone do that in like a split second? But I was just there. I felt God's light coming towards me and giving me certain messages like, be like a little child, and just certain messages that were very simple. Love is all you take with you when you go, those types of messages. And then I saw my life almost projected like a hologram across the sky. And there were many moments that were good, like playing in nature, just being kind to people, that was seen as good. And then there's a fast forward to this moment where I was judgmental. So I didn't treat anybody badly, but I had thoughts in my head. I don't want to be their friends. They're older than me. They're not at the university. They're just no one I want to know. And I saw that they went home and prayed for me because they thought I was depressed. And I was. And I just felt like my soul just took this big sigh of sadness. And I was like, oh, I missed out on beautiful people because I was consumed with my opinions and my judgments. And I made a snap judgment about really beautiful, kind people. And I thought, I wonder how many times in my life I'm going to be surrounded by beautiful, kind people. I need to find them. I need to find the humble and true hearts of this world and know them and be good to them. And those are the people that we should have as friends, people who wish us well. Now, I didn't see all the people who wished me harm or did harm to me. It was almost like that was non-existent in this place. Like if people treated you badly, who cares? That's on them. That's their life review, not yours. What you do is your review. And so I remember being relieved of that, oh, I don't have to carry the shame of child abuse, or I don't have to carry any shame. I just felt light. And then I transitioned into this beautiful realm, which looked like a perfect earth, like a perfect pasture. The grass was very green. Emerald green is the closest color I can describe, but you can't really describe the colors because, like the angel's eyes, it was lit up with light. Each blade of grass was made of light and colors you can't see with human eyes. And the grass kind of swayed. And I just felt enormous peace and rest. And I knew that this was somewhat of a holding place. My grandfather showed up, and he was the only person I was close to who was dead. And when I saw him, I almost didn't recognize him because he looked so young and good. He had died at 71, and he had died of leukemia, and he was gaunt and frail at the end. And over there, he looked about 35 and full of light and health. And like the angels, his eyes just kind of shone with this light. And I knew that he loved me. I knew he wanted me to be safe, and he wanted me to play here for a while. It almost like I was a kid. So my spirit form became a child. And that's how I knew my grandfather. And we just hung out there. What's odd about my near-death experience, and this is where people sometimes go, well, isn't that a dream? Then he had a vehicle there. Why would anyone have a vehicle? And I was like, no, he was showing me that things on earth that are destroyed can be made new in heaven. Everything that dies here can be made new and glorious, and that we can play with consciousness in that way. And he showed me this truck, and the truck always made me sad because he gave it to my dad, and my dad just let it rust in the yard. And I would love to have this truck, but it was a 1965 Chevy truck and it was blue and it was perfect in heaven. And so he started driving it. I got on the back of it like I did as a kid. And then he turned back to me and he was like, "Do you want to keep going on?" And I knew that meant towards God. And I just was like, yeah, who wouldn't want to go meet God? But I also knew that he was holding me, not knowing if he needed to send me back to my body or if things were getting dicey. So I did have this awareness that they were having trouble reviving me. And so as I went toward the light, I felt so good. And I felt people's prayers trying to pull me back. I could hear every word they said, but it didn't matter. I was like, there's God. I've got to go towards God. And every childhood wound, everything that made me feel less than or not worthy or not respected or neglected, all of that just started fading away. And I felt seen and understood, and that someone had great empathy for me and great love. And then I even understood, oh, like I'm a part of God. We're all a part of God, and we forget that. And as we are a part of God, we're sent out to explore and to learn and to grow and then return to God and show God all that we learned, and that God likes to see us just being in joy and happiness, and that is our natural state. So as I got closer to God, I just felt so good. There was no love affair, no drug, no happy mood that could even compare to it. No love compares to that love. And of course, I didn't want to come back. I mean, when you feel something that good, when you feel better than you've ever felt before, why do you want to return here? And that's when I had that thought, I was stopped and told to look down, and I saw it's almost like consciousness speaks to one another, and God projected this river, and all these different souls either had light around them or they had darkness, and it looked very simple. People are either in fear or they're in love. They're either connected to God and getting some of that information from God, that they are loved, they are a part of God, no matter what is going on here, that they are just meant to shine light, or they're dealing with something around them that prevents them from having that connection to God. And it didn't seem to be religious. It seemed to me like even an atheist, like my surgeon was, could be worked through, because she had a passion for surgery and she had a passion for helping people. It didn't seem as if only religious people had light. In fact, not at all the case. Some do, some don't. Some are in great fear, and some are in that flow and that connection of light. But it didn't matter. None of that mattered. What mattered is, do you have a connection to God? And I understood that my mission was to help people connect to the light, to connect to the light of who they are, and remember their purpose, and remember that even in a dark world, you can spread optimism, you can choose things. And I still understand this. Even if the worst possible things have happened to you in life, you have a choice. You can either get bitter and angry and be a victim about this, you can be unconscious and perpetrate the same things, or you can heal and help others because of your wounds and grow stronger because of that, and look to God for healing. So I understood I was going to be a teacher, not at first a spiritual teacher, an actual teacher. And that's where my ego like erupted. And I was like, no, wait, let's renegotiate this contract. Like, I don't know about this. I'm not going back there to be teachers. They don't pay them anything. I grew up poor. There's no way I'm going to do that. I was looking into more lucrative careers like law, and then God just laughed at me, almost as if, oh, you silly thing. And my spirit felt like almost balled up like a softball and thrown through space back into my body. And I didn't have a choice. Some people make a choice, and I was told I'm going to return and I'm going to teach. And when I woke up after surgery, I didn't have to remember this. It was all there. Even as I was coming out of anesthesia and they were taking out things out of my throat that burned. My first understanding was that my consciousness had changed. I felt a part of the room, I felt a part of people, I felt different. And I hardly felt like myself, even immediately. And when they asked me my name, they said, "Will you please say your name to make sure I'm with it after surgery?" I was like, "Oh, I remember her name." And they looked at me and they said, "You need to say your name." But I was looking at myself as a third person. I felt like I was with God. I was so much more than this limited version. I had just been with God. And when I said my name and I realized I had to identify with this body again, there was sadness because I knew, as we know now, the body contains traumatic memories. The body holds on to things. Our ancestors give us certain programs. They're unhealed. I just knew that there was limitation to the body. I knew I'd have to recover and learn to walk again. And I just remember being a little depressed thinking about the body, but being happy thinking about that connection. Luckily, I'm a bit of a rebel and I just refused to listen to anyone. I understood that I had this connection, and luckily, spirit started working with me. So my agnostic friends were like, whatever, like that was a dream. That was the drugs. My family was like, she's on drugs. How could she talk about God? She doesn't go to church. They said really kind of mean things. My grandmother was the only person who brought me a journal and a notebook. And so I wrote down everything I remembered about the angels. So it was a journey. First, through healing, I stayed in contact with my angels because I saw them during surgery and I was like, well, you were there. Now, after 9 days in the hospital, I was back at my mom's house in a body cast, and it was painful those first couple of weeks, especially the first week. I could barely sleep. It felt like a red hot poker down my back. And I would ask the angels when I couldn't sleep, I'd just say, work on me. Let's speed this up a little. And they'd flood my body with this blue calming light. And I knew that they were continuing to work on me. And I knew that all we had to do was ask. And then honestly, I was disconnected from my body at times. I knew, I was like, let's see if I can get out of body. Can I have an out of body experience since I've had a near death experience? I was able to do that with some practice. I was able to lucid dream. It took about a month to get there. And every night I'd meditate and say, you're going to see your hand in a dream. And then one night I saw it and I was able to dream. And my consciousness just ate up different spiritual books. So my mom brought me, she went to the library. I told her what books to get, and she got books from Raymond Moody and different people, spiritual teachers at the time. And was like, they're speaking my language. I understand this. And Sylvia Brown and all the different Louise Hay and everyone who was big in the 90s. Deepak Chopra, listened to audio tapes, even listened to Tony Robbins, just anyone who was motivational and uplifting. I wanted to hear from them and I wanted to view life differently. And I really wanted to look at my own wounds and start letting go of all that, and wondered how I was going to help others. I knew I had to do some healing. In that time, I was healing my body. I began to work on healing myself emotionally. Not that we're ever done. I'm still working on it. It's some progress, not perfection, as they say. And in those moments, I first had a connection to angels, and then luckily I met some spiritual friends. One was a Reiki worker, he was an energy worker, and really a connected guy. He was in touch with angels and he felt the presence of Jesus, and he also did clearings of ghosts. So he taught me how to go into people's houses, how to sense energy, how to clear it, how to work with difficult cases. And with him, I really learned that your angels can work even in small situations. Say you're getting your hair cut and you're talking to the person cutting your hair. Sometimes angels are working through them to help you. Sometimes your angels are working through you to help them. That life is this flow of assistance and of support. And that was a beautiful way to start looking at life. And I did what God said. I got certified to teach. And my first class, I remember going to the bathroom and going, Okay, God, I'm a little nervous. This is not about me, though. This is your mission for me. So, since it's your mission, I give my ego over. This is not about me. This is about you, and take over. If angels want to work through me, work through me. And it took me a while to realize this, but that part of my life worked perfectly. Students, yes, students are students and they'll test you and try you, but generally there was a healing that came out of every quote bad episode. I would find out that a student was abused at home and help them go to counseling and begin to work on a plan for their life. Or there were just so many instances where I knew spirit was helping me with these particular souls. And I looked around and there weren't other teachers that involved. And then I thought, oh my goodness, it's good I'm here because I see what the student is going through. He's being beaten by his dad, and his mom isn't around, and this is a very hard situation. Or she's just been assaulted, and I'm the first person she told, and I have to guide her through this. And there were so many moments where I felt over my head, just like I'm a social worker more than a teacher. There were those moments, and yet at the same time, I felt deeply supported. It wasn't draining. And that's what I always want to tell other empaths and people who are sensitive. When you think about it and you take it in too much into your body, it can drain you. And there were times I did that and it was draining when I kept thinking about it and I was mad. Why does this kid have to go to that home? But when I was just in motion, doing what I could to make someone's life better, I understood the reason why you don't have to get drained, that the light can simply work through you and you can let it go and know that you did your part and you did your best in that moment. And it took a while, honestly, for mediumship to come to the forefront because I was a busy teacher, and I really just used the light for a long time in that way. Back in 2008, my father died, and he was close to me as an adult. He was my one source of unconditional love. He always built up my self-esteem. If I had a breakup, he was like, oh, he doesn't deserve you anyway, you're so much better than him. He was that type of guy. You're gonna be fine, Tricia. He was always uplifting and always positive and always on my side. And when he died, I realized, oh, I just lost the person who loves me unconditionally, and it's hard to find that here. And the hole was enormous. And then I thought, well, I've been over there. Maybe I can follow him. And I did. I followed him. The minute he died, his parents came to me in a dream, and I'd been there the whole day with him. I went home to sleep, and then he died that night. They looked beautiful. I recognized my grandfather, who I'd seen in my near-death experience, and then my grandmother had died too. And she was a lovely woman who loved my dad so much. And I knew he was welcomed into their presence and that they were going to guide him into heaven. And then I thought, all right, Dad, let's see what you're up to. Like, what do you do over there when it's not a near-death experience? How do you spend your time? His life review was very long, almost as if he saw every possible option, that if he had done this one thing differently, all these other realities might have happened. And choices became almost like a different movie, or how they say different realities or different timelines. He saw all of his timelines. And this seems very complicated here. How can just little moments matter so much? But they did. And so he spent a long time in review, and then he expanded into other people's lives, the world, his place, his mission. And he determined that he wanted to return again at some point, that he wanted to reincarnate. But I followed him as he went to the oneness of God, as he understood the workings of the universe. Like he really expanded into this deep, profound knowing. And I remember asking him certain questions. I was like, if I have a connection to you, can you help me? And sometimes I didn't like his answers. Like, I was like, really? No. But every time he was right. And I was like, darn, I guess I'll listen to you. And he was like, look, I'm not your earthly father. I'm over here. So I see things differently. So don't look at it like your father's telling you something to do. And he said, and you can always bypass me and just ask God, like that he often reminded me of that I don't have to stay in connection with him, that it's just comforting. And I think it's interesting. So I had my own connection. My grandfather would connect with me too. And at different times in life, when I was needing help with something, he would sometimes offer guidance. A lot of different people from my ends who went to the meetings started emailing me and said, hey, I've lost a child. Can you, since you have this connection, please see what you can get? And I went into meditation, and then I just started seeing people that they were connected to in love. How it works is it works through that person. If you have a connection to someone and they want you to have a message, then your loved one shows up. Consciousness can be played with in various ways. If you're a musician, you can be inspired by the spirit of artists who have passed on. And I think that's possible when you have some sort of connection. But it was really the mothers who've lost kids who convinced me to be a medium. For about a year, I just did it for donation only, like no price, just see if I can do it. And then I got tested by different people who would ask me for blind readings where I knew nothing. I didn't know their name, I didn't know who they'd lost, and I just had to talk for 15 minutes. And I was curious at the end of it. I was like, or did I get the right people? Was that right? And they did at least give me that verification. Then you go, this is wild. This is a wild experience. I've had to learn things along the way of how to protect myself, because sometimes early on the spirits would keep talking to me after the readings. So I've learned how to close it and open it and wish them well and not get continued conversation, because then I'd have a group of people talking to me and you can't do life. But there were some students' ancestors who would come through, and especially if a young student lost a parent, they usually do come through. But grandparents are frequent in the classroom, and sometimes, and it all depends on the situation. But I would hear certain things and I never talked about it. I just, only once or twice did I say to the student, I think I got a message from your grandparent. Do you want to hear this? And they always say yes. They're curious. In general, younger people are open to these things. But sometimes I just incorporated intuition into what I said. So if I heard a grandparent say, she's really interested in fashion and becoming a hairdresser, don't push her to go to college, this is what she wants to do, then I just start talking to her about, hey, you seem like an artistic person, you have great style, have you ever thought about going into fashion? And use that information to help people in certain ways. So now I do a combination of medium readings for people. My favorites are still through helping parents heal and parents who've lost kids. I think that's important. It's healing. And then I also have gotten some pets that come through, which is always fun, cats and dogs. And the dogs have so much fun over there, how dogs play in life. Over on the other side, they really play. If they love water, they dive through the water, and they're not limited in the way that they're limited here. So they are still connected to us through love. My biggest mission is still just healing and connecting people to the light. So I do a form of theta healing. I make it my own. I've taken many courses in it, but I love that energy release of letting go of programs that hold us back and really just feeling that connection to God. I was fearless after the near-death experience, almost to this crazy point of, I remember once I was able to hike, I hiked really dangerous mountains, and I always knew that if I fell and I'd die, that was fine. I didn't want an accident. So I was triggered by cars. I didn't want my body to be more damaged. I'm just going back there. I'm glad I was tested, because I was very calm in a moment where we had a plane that was going down. And so it's the weirdest sensation. We weren't skydiving. We were like a brick falling from the air. And it was unbelievable. We lost both engines, and I don't know what exactly happen, but they told us to get into the crash position. But I was like, crash position, we're falling, we're not landing. And I thought, okay, when we hit the ground, I'm just going to go up to the lights. And at that point, I had only taught a few classes, and I was like, all right, God, I guess it's my time. You just wanted me to meet those students, and now I'm being taken home, and I can't wait to see you. And the guy next to me was screaming. He was like, my kids, I can't die. I've got kids. And the woman next to me was like, oh God, okay. And I grabbed their hands and I said, listen to me. I've died. And we are probably going to leave our bodies before we even hit that ground, that we're just going to be out. And I want everyone on this plane, and I was talking to people around me, to just focus on the light. We're going to go up to God. If we do this, we're going to do it together, and God is going to welcome us, and we're going to be so joyful and happy. And they listened to me, and then the plane caught. So one of the engines came back on, and we made an emergency landing far away from where we were supposed to land. And the guy next to me was like, what is wrong with you? Who are you? How are you so calm? And I was like, oh, I had a near-death experience, so I just know that I'm going home to God. And I was even a little excited. I know that sounds weird. Most people wouldn't be excited, but I was like, I get to see God again. So definitely no fear of death. I don't like pain. I don't want any more accidents. So I'm terrified in cars of breaking another bone. I'm terrified of injury, but I'm not terrified of death. And I think that's the difference. I want to share that with people. And luckily, I have been able to share it with people and teach them how to have out of body experiences right before they've transitioned, so that they are certain that they're going. My website is the easiest, and I have Tricia Barker, Tricia Barker, Barker, NDE for neardeathexperience.com. And I have a calendar and a contact page, so you can email me through that link, or you can schedule an appointment. I think the main thing that I want people to take away from this is, if you are depressed, if you are in anxiety, if you are in fear, go to nature. Nature is very healing, and pray to God. Open yourself to a greater power than yourself, and ask that God, for your higher self, deal with some of your problems and show you the right answers. If you want to pray to your angels to help you in little ways, if you are sick, have them send healing energy to the supplements and medicines that you take, and ask that God work through you. Because when you slow down and you're living in the moment, that's when the magic happens. That's when you can feel God. That's when you can feel your angels and guides and ancestors. And meditation is definitely a great thing. So I've been a pretty much, I say lifelong, but from my near-death experience to now, I meditate. And even after going through traumas after my near-death experience and great loss and pain, I stay supported. When things are rough, meditation just gets you to calmness. When you're in a great state, meditation can eventually open you to these experiences and to expanded consciousness. So definitely stick with meditation. It does open up things. And if you are frustrated and you want a connection to your loved ones, you don't have to pay a medium. You can have your own connection. And there are some modalities. I just learned about one, which is induced after death communication. And there are therapists who can guide you to have a connection to your loved one. They have a 50% success rate right from the beginning. And then of the 50 who don't have communication, another 30% open up. So that's a lot of people who are able to have some form of communication with their loved ones once they clear out the trauma and the grief. And so I try to do some theta healing with my clients too, to work on their trauma so that maybe they're better primed to be in that 50%, or to have spontaneously their own connection. I would say, believe that you can have a connection and it will open up.